Okay, so I want to continue with our applications of our formal logic. I want to do another translating back and forth between English and math. So this is problem number 5 from the exercises in 1.2. Let me pull it up on screen here so you can see it. We're going to do number 5. It starts down in the first column and goes up to the second column. You are eligible to be president of the USA only if you are at least 35 years old, were born in the USA, or at the time of your birth, both your parents were citizens, and you have lived at least 14 years in the country. Express your answer in terms of E, you are eligible to be president. A, you are at least 35 years old. B, you were born in the USA. P, at the time of your birth, both your parents were citizens. And R, you have lived at least 14 years in the United States. Okay, you need this text in front of you. We're going to go back to the other screen so you can see what I'm writing. You are eligible to be the president of the United States only if, just like we did on Friday, that means the you are eligible is the antecedent of our conditional statement. You are eligible only if a bunch of stuff. Only if you are at least 35 years old, you meet the age requirement. You were born in the USA or at the time of your birth, both your parents were citizens. So you have to be a citizen. So you were born in the United States and, sorry, you were at least 35 years old and you were born in the United States or at the time of your birth, your parents were citizens. And residency, you have lived at least 14 years in the United States. Now, I think this is not written correctly. I think we're missing something. Let's read the clauses again in the sentence. You are at least 35 years old, were born in the USA, or at the time of your birth, both your parents were citizens. So the born in the United States or parents were citizens really are talking about the same idea. They're talking about you being a citizen or being the child of citizens. So I think in our written setup here, if we were to do this from left to right, A and B or P, there would be parentheses here. But I don't think that's correct. I think the parentheses should be here. Those are considered together. And the reason we consider those together is because they're really dealing with the idea of citizenship. After all, now President Trump, then Mr. Trump, spent quite a lot of time talking about citizenship of Barack Obama. John McCain actually had to have his citizenry declared by Congress because he was born on a military base, which means he wasn't technically born in the United States, but then military bases are considered to be U.S. territory. So it was implied in there. But now I can go through and I can say, I am eligibly president only if I meet all of these conditions. And as long as I put a check on age, a check on residency, and a check on one of these, then I have 3 check marks and I'm good to go. Realize that if we regrouped those parentheses, we might only need 2 check marks, right? If I wrote A and B or P and R, well, then I'd have a problem because this says your parents are citizens and you've lived here 14 years, or you're at least 35 and were born a citizen. You could be at least 35, born a citizen, and left the United States at age 2 and not have been back yet. Have you met the residency requirement? So these are not equivalent clauses. We need to be careful about this. Normally, at this point, I would stop and ask if there were questions. But since I'm recording and you're not here, I can't exactly do that. So if you have questions, stop the video, type up your question in an email, and come back to me. So that way I can answer your question, or come see me in my office hours this afternoon. I will still be there. Quite frequently, when I think of working in formal logic, I think about working in computers. And I did say to you the other day that I was working on the idea of circuits as well. So let's think about hardware and software specifications within a system. I might be asking, is this computer capable of running the program I want? And then I could ask, do I have all the hardware necessary to do the things I need? Do I have enough RAM? Do I have enough addressable disk space? Do I have a sufficiently uh, sized monitor where I can do all of these things? Or maybe I'm looking within a particular sentence to try and figure out what's being said here. Here we go. An example. I am going to use the variable p to represent the statement, the proposition, the message was scanned for viruses. And here's another proposition. Q, the message was sent from an unknown system. So now I want to turn sentences into propositional phrases. I want to be able to use this to figure out what a sentence would read as. So here's a sentence. The message was scanned for viruses. The message is scanned for viruses whenever the message was sent from an unknown system. So now I need to think about what's the proposition in this sentence, what's the connector in this sentence, what logical operation is being used here. There's one of my propositions. There's another one. So I have a P, I have a Q. So this sentence reads P whenever Q. So now I have to ask you, how does the word whenever translate? This sentence sounds like an if-then. Which part is the if? If the message was scanned, then it was sent from an unknown system, or the other way around? If the message was sent from an unknown system, then it is scanned. Back on page 7 is all of our translations for a conditional, and I see that P arrow Q is Q whenever P. So this Q whenever P whenever Q means that the sentence I should be writing says that this is the antecedent. If I do Q, then I'm going to do P. Make sense? I hope. Here, let's try another one. Um, the message was sent from an unknown system, but it was not scanned for viruses. So now again, I have to ask the question, what logical connective is here? Here's a proposition. Here's a proposition. So this sentence reads, the message was sent from an unknown system, but was not scanned for viruses. What's going on here? But is not one of my logical operations anywhere in the list. I had and, or, exclusive or, if then, and the biconditional if and only if. Oh, and regular negation, but is not there. Huh. I don't like that word. So how else could I write this? And really, what about this not right here? What does that make this propositional phrase? Really makes it a not P. The message was not scanned for viruses. How is this behaving? It's really behaving like an and. The message was sent from an unknown system and it was not scanned for viruses. The word but is not part of our logical connective list. We need to be careful there. So, in spite of the fact that I know what the word should be saying to me, I have to read what it actually did say to me. And that's important. One more. I skipped C on purpose. You should do it. When a message is not sent from an unknown system, it is not scanned for viruses. First of all, I think that's a bad virus policy. If you know your sender, you should trust them, even in the case of a virus. I don't know about that. That word is not part of our propositional behavior, not one of our propositions. The negations are in here. So this first part of the sentence, a message is sent from an unknown system, that's Q. But I've got a negative floating around in it. Same thing here. It is scanned for viruses is P, but I've got a negation in it. What connector should go there? The word when. It's not on my list. So I need to find it. There it is. P arrow Q reads Q when P. P arrow Q reads Q when P. How do I read this? This proposition. A message is sent from an unknown system. Our not Q is attached to the word when. So this sentence is being read. A message is not scanned for viruses when the message is sent from an unknown system. This is playing the role of the antecedent. So Q when P. The when P part is this. That's this. When P. When a message is sent from an unknown system. That's this part, antecedent. It is not scanned for viruses, consequence. Aha! I think I get this now. The reason I want to do this, a specification is consistent if they do not contain conflicting propositions that result in a contradiction. I need a definition. A propositional phrase or a collection of phrases that is always false, no matter the truth values of the individual variables, is a contradiction. An example. Think about this statement. If you really want me to be liberal artsy, I can use Shakespeare. To be and not to be. Hang on a second. Um, if I have a proposition P, it is either true or false. Its negation will be the reverse of those. Now let's build this and statement. One true, one false. This is an and. And is true when both are true, so this is false. Same thing here. This is never true. This sentence cannot be satisfied. Ah, my specifications are consistent if they don't contain conflicting propositions that cause a contradiction. If I can build my truth tables for all of the propositions I have together, then make a truth table, as long as somewhere in that truth table there's one row with a true in it, I'm good to go. Now, the issue is defining our statements. I need to ensure that when I look at the problem, I read it carefully, and the result is something I can actually translate. Let's take a look again at a problem from the textbook. Problem number 11. I've made it big so we can read it easier. The router can send packets to the edge system only if it supports the new address space. For the router to support the new address space, it is necessary that the latest software release be installed. The router can send packets to the edge system if the latest software release is installed. The router does not support the new address state. So I need to know if I need to replace my router, because the last line says the router does not support the address space. Can I send packets? Can I support the address space? I need to know what's going on. So, in order to make sense of this, I need to know what the propositional variables are that I'm using here. Well, let's think about this. I can send packets. The router can send packets to the edge system. Let's make that one of our variables. It's about packets. We'll call it P. Okay. Only if. Okay, wait a minute. That right there, I see a logical connective. That means the thing on the other side of only if should be also a propositional variable. Only if it supports the new address space. The router supports the new address space. For the router to support the new address space, it is necessary that the latest software release be installed. Okay, now we have software. The router does not support the new address space. That's not a new propositional variable. So I have three variables that get used as propositions in this problem. Now because you'll notice this is typed up, I posted this to our Canvas page. If you want to see everything I'm about to work through typed up nicely, you can go look at it on our Canvas page. But let's take these sentences and turn them into propositions. So I have, sorry, not propositions, logical statements in variables. The router can send packets only if it supports the new address space. The first sentence, P only if A. Okay, wait a second. Go back to page 7. Let's take a look at that thing on page 7. Only if P arrow Q, P only if Q. So this becomes P arrow A. Great. Second sentence. For the router to support the new address space, that's A. For A, for the router to support the new address space. It is necessary that the latest software release be installed. Okay. I need to go back to that list because this again sounds like an if-then. Necessary. The word in there is necessary. Wait a second. Here we go. Necessary condition. Necessary. Q is necessary for P, P arrow Q. So is necessary for. The word for is the piece that's here in particular. So I think this says it is necessary that the software is in for A. I'm actually going to rewrite it so that it matches the sentence I have there. S is necessary for A, and that'll get translated as A arrow S. Q is necessary for P, P arrow Q. Okay, sentence 3. The router can send packets if the latest software release is installed. If software, then packets. Packets can be sent if the latest software is installed. That's S arrow P. Very last sentence, sentence number 4. The router does not support the new address space. Those are my 4 sentences. I have 3 variables here. Those 3 variables means I have 8 rows. Yes? 8 rows. So, I have, in this order, I have P, A, S. Notice how this one flips every 1, this one flips every 2, this one flips every 4. Whew. Now, I want to look at all of these together. So I'm going to make a column for each one. P arrow A. It's an if-then statement. I only care about P and A, so I don't care about S. If-then is false when the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. T arrow F is the problem. So I get line 3 and line 4 giving me Fs. Everything else gives me a true. The second sentence is A arrow S. I don't care about P in this time, so I can cover it up. Same thing. T arrow F is the problem. Whew. Third sentence, S arrow P. The problem is I got to read the arrow right to left this time. So, true arrow true, false arrow true, true arrow true, false arrow true, true arrow false, false arrow false, true arrow false, false arrow false. Wow. Last, but by no means least, sentence number 4. Not A. Well, that's just a flip. Okay, I want all of these things to work together. That's an and statement. If I call these one, two, three, and four, I want one and two and three and four. And as I said to you on Friday, we can take a binary operation and extend it to be more, as long as they're all the same. If I want ands to be true, it's only true when all of them are true. So looking at our four pieces, is there a place where you see all four columns containing a T at the same time? Top row? Nope. There's a false here. There's a false here. So these first two rows, no. There's a false in the first column, in the first column, in the last column, in the last column, in the third column. Oh, crud. Yay! This set of propositions, this set of system specifications can be satisfied once, but it can be satisfied. Once is enough. It's not a contradiction. These are consistent. It means we have to figure out which of these things, according to this, they all need to be false. I need to know that the router doesn't send packets, that the router doesn't support the address space, and it doesn't have the latest software for me to show that these all work. That's weird, but that's the way it works. So this is consistent. It's not nice, but it is consistent. Again, at this point, I would look around the room and ask about questions. You're not here. If you have questions, you should be writing them down, pausing the video, checking the timestamp, and then emailing me or coming to my office hours on Google Meet this afternoon or whenever you want to see me. Please notice, I've put this in the very abstract format, but you use logical operations like this all the time. Get on Google and you can search for thing and thing. Heck, go into your email account and do a search. You can search by the sender and the topic. You can search by the sender and the date. You can put an or here. You can even put the word not here to exclude a particular thing from your search. Google supports all of that. So really, if you want to do any sort of a web search at all, you can get all of our operations in Google exactly the way you want it. Every single search operation we want to do supports this sort of language. And that's a wonderful benefit to us. Now, I guarantee you, you've done this stuff before without thinking of it like this. Anybody who plays Wordle, connections, or any other type of logic puzzle at all, they're all based on these ideas. Math is in every single game you play when you think about the logic involved in that game. Even games that are completely deterministic use this sort of logic. A gentleman by the name of Raymond Smullyan. I hope I'm spelling that right. Let me check. Raymond Smullyan was known for whole sets of books um, in New York where he wrote puzzles. And one of the most famous sets of puzzles that Smullyan wrote were called Knights and Knaves. You live in a kingdom populated by knights and knaves. Knights always tell the truth. Knaves always lie. Now, Smulyan goes on to give you ideas about things that people can say to you. And then you have to figure out who's what. Depending on what people say, you may or may not be able to make a conclusion. Here's an example. A says, at least one of us is a knave. B says, nothing. Can you draw a conclusion from this and figure out whether or not A is a knight or B is a knight or A is a knave or B is a knave? Can you actually figure out who's telling the truth and who's lying from this setup? Sure you can. But what we need to do is we need to look at the possibilities. These are if-then statements. A can either be a knave or a knight. If A is a knave, then A is lying. But his statement says at least one of us is a knave. So what is the opposite of this statement? Well, at least one of us means one or more. The opposite of that is none of us are knaves. That's a logical equivalence. I should use that. But if none of us are knaves, then what is true? If none of us are knaves, everybody's either a knight or a knave. And both of us are knights. But what do we know about knights? Knights always tell the truth. Didn't I just contradict myself? So A can't be a knave. If A can't be a knave, then A must be a knight. And knights tell the truth. Knights tell the truth. At least one of us is a knave. But A is not a knave. That means B must be a knave. I now know who is who. From those sentences alone and looking at negation and the operations we have, I can figure out who's who. There are a number of Smulyan puzzles in the exercises, 23 through 35. Um, Smulyan even extends this idea. Knights always tell the truth. Knaves always lie. Normals can do whatever they want. They can lie or tell the truth. Now, here's a situation where I have one of each. How can I figure out what's going on? What if I have a crime and I'm interviewing all these people And some of them may be telling the truth and some of them may be lying. Can I figure out who's doing what based on the sentences I get? I used to find books of these that had huge grids where you'd have, the person with the dog lives in the red house. The person in the green house owns a parakeet. The person with the parakeet lives next to the person with the cat. Who lives where? And it was a giant set of making these truths match up. But if I'm thinking about grids, then I'm going to think about one of the most famous grid puzzles around, and that's a Sudoku. A Sudoku is nothing more than a satisfiability process. I have 81 squares that I am going to put a number in. 9 across by 9 down, and 9 little blocks. And I have to make sure that no number repeats in any row, any column, or any block. That's a giant set of, if I put this number here, can I keep making other numbers fit? There are 729 different ands. And I think there are an equivalent number of ors. There are hundreds of axioms that get written up based on what you know in a logic puzzle. Wow. Sudoku is really one of the most formal logic games you can play. All right. I said last week that every single circuit you build is based on these logical ideas. Well, I can actually make that formal. In circuit design, we use what are called logic gates. And logic gates are physically made up of pieces of silicon with electrocapacitive behavior. These are gates. An inverter takes in a signal, puts out its negative. That's a NOT. An OR gate and an AND gate. These three pieces can be built physically to create other complicated sentences. So, what's interesting to me is that they actually work by the way they let electricity through. On our Canvas page, hang on a second. Let me bring up our Canvas page. On our Canvas page, if I scroll down to the web links section, I have this page, says TI chips, logic gates. This is the website where Texas Instruments actually produces physical silicon chips. And the silicon chips we get have all sorts of different possibilities. Here, let's look at AND gates. One of the AND gates I used I need a simple 4-channel. This should work. Here's an image. This is what the physical object looks like right here. You connect wires to these pins. One of these is a power, one of these is a ground. Then you'll notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 7 on each side. I have a power and a ground for the whole thing. And then I have 2 in and 1 out. So 1, 2, 3. That's an in and an out. 2 ins and 1 out for an AND. We invert, we do the AND, we reinvert. That's what this is building. It's 4 of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, on our chip, round and out. But each one does this. Inside the wiring is the little piece of silicon that actually does it. All of these bits are etched onto the silicon in such a way that they let the voltages through when the power is high or low. If I send in a low power signal to something like an inverter, when I send in a low, I get out a high. When I send in a high, I get out a low. It's doing it in voltages. Most of the time, these operate around 5 volts, which is why you can operate a bunch of these things on AA batteries, because 4 AA batteries gives you 6 volts. When I have an OR gate, I need to send in two things, P, Q, and what comes out is P or Q. When I have an AND gate, same thing. If I send in a low and a high, I know what I'll get. True, 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 false, false, true, false, false. So if I'm doing OR, I get those. If I'm doing AND, I get those. But now I can build up more complicated circuitry. And those circuits, I can then figure out what they're going to do. Or I can go the other way and I can say, here's a thing. What does it do? Ready? Here's a picture. I want to know what this picture does. So I have P and Q and R. What's going to come out here? Okay, what's this operator? That's a not. So what comes out of this is not R. What comes out of this is not Q. This is still P. I haven't done anything to it. What comes out of here? Oh, what symbol is this? That's an AND. So this is P and not Q. Notice this wire goes up here and gives me an R. So what comes out is P and not Q or R. Oh, sorry, not R. I have to make sure I don't lose stuff. Now, I said a moment ago that I used these gates. I have a story for you. In the early 90s, I did an internship at a pacemaker plant. Um, the company was called Telectronics Pacing. And it used to be a subsidiary of Cordis. Um, my dad was an R&D engineer, and I got to work there one summer. And they asked me to create a lead tester. We had a wire that consisted of 4 insulated pieces wrapped in one bundle. So all 4 of these wires had to send electricity. Now, this was actually part of a defibrillator. You know what a defibrillator is? The defibrillator is the thing they shock your heart with when your heart is out of rhythm. So if you suffer from something like atrial fibrillation or ventricular tachycardia, where your heart doesn't beat right, then the electricity in your heart is not flowing properly to make it go thud thud, thump thump, thump thump. The bottom of the heart squeezes, that's the hefty, hard beat, and then the top of the heart squeezes, and that's the softer beat. That's the boom, 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 boom. It's the two different pieces of your heart contracting. But you need electricity to make the muscles squeeze. And if your electricity isn't working, we put a controller on one end and we connect these wires to the parts of your heart that aren't working right. And we line up the rhythms just right with our pacemaker on this side. A defibrillator just gives a general shock to those pieces, hoping that the intrinsic electrical behavior of your heart will start taking over again. Normally, when you do it from the outside, you have those two paddles and you go clear, thunk, and everybody jumps away so that you can do this. My job was to make sure these four wires didn't have a short circuit. So what I did is I labeled the four wires and then I sent electricity down wire A. And I said, hey, if A and B light up, or if A and C light up, or if A and D light up, turn on a light bulb and sound a buzzer. Because then I'll know there's a fault. If those work, then look at B and C or B and D. And if one of those lights up, do this. And if those are okay, then look at C and D. So if at any point in time, any of these combinations, actually, I didn't do that as an or, I did these as separate steps. Here I had electricity in A, but I checked B, C, and D. Here I had electricity in B, so I checked C and D. Here I had electricity in C and checked D. I didn't have to check B with A because I'd already checked that up here. I did this for a wire about the length of my arm made of woven platinum and iridium. And I kept at it for about 10 minutes. And when I went back to my boss and I said, okay, this works, he goes, good, build me four more of them. Out of what? Well, he took me back to the chip box and I looked at all the chips and I put the gates together. And then I got a little clock that would send out electricity going boop, 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 boop. It would send it out A and it would check A, B, A, C, A, D. And then it would move to B and it would go boop, boop, boop. And it would go B, C, B, D. And it would move to C. And then it would cycle through it over and over and over again. I got to the point where the box I was physically building was about the size of a deck of playing cards. Had four little lights on it, so I knew which light had which electric wires had electricity at the same time. And if any two lights were on, we sounded the buzzer. Those wires had to be hand woven and hand dipped into their insulative casings, and they were about $40,000 a piece. I had 10 of them. I then put these wires in a testing rig, which had the electricity at one end and the sensor at the other, and went like this to see what would happen as the wires bent and flexed inside a human body. And in order to make it really feel like a human body, we put that whole arrangement in a tank of water kept at 37 degrees Celsius with some salt in it to be about the same electrical conductive behavior as blood. These were designed to save lives. And the only thing I did to do it was use logic gates. Useless crap. We're never going to do it anywhere. Saving lives with this idea. I can also build a better iPhone or build a better piece of encryption technology, but I can save lives. So, the more complicated my expression, the more of a pain in the neck it is to actually design the circuitry. And a lot of cases, I want to try and simplify my circuitry. That's what we're going to do on Wednesday. Please read this carefully. You are reminded that your first set of homework problems is due on Wednesday. If you want to ask me questions, you should get back on our Canvas page. You should go down here to the web links section. There is the Google Meet for my office hours for Monday. If you want to see me Monday between 1:50 and 3:30, you should click on this link right here. Make sure you're logged into your Gmail account and it will take you directly to the office and you'll see this camera just like you saw it today with my piece of paper under it, and I'll be able to talk to you and answer any question you have. If you are looking for my lecture notes, they are down here. If you want to see the other videos, that's this YouTube playlist right here, link number 3. I will see you all on Wednesday. I hope you stayed safe from the storm and the snow and didn't have any trouble. Have a wonderful day.